Hi, y'all. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And this is November, and we are reading Bananapants by Penny Reid. This is a
And
standalone story, but it is a second generation story for a lot of you Knitting in the City fans out there. So we hope you have fun with us. So we start with Ava Archer. She agrees to attend this like secret high society party for her doppelganger coworker. Um, This is apparently like a semi-common like meetup time for this group. Like it's a lot of wealthy people like arrange marriages and stuff at this event. And her boss, or I can't remember if it's just coworker or boss, but she didn't want to go. She's already seeing somebody. Like she has
she's
no
a
interest in
coworker.
arranging a marriage. And so she agrees to go for her and stay for an hour. Um, and she's doing pretty well with her impersonation until
You think?
she hears a voice from the past calling out her real middle name. This is the only person who ever like called her by her middle name and asking her, "What's up with the wig?"
Yeah. She did. I do want to like back up just a smidge and say that when she got there, she's kind of enjoying the sights. She's like, when else would I be able to come into this like secret society of rich people?
Yeah,
But this guy comes up to her and seems kind of like amused by her, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sure you're here to meet Henry Whitford." And she's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." But she plays along because she thinks like, oh, she's representing this other person, so she's
yeah.
kind of like, sure. Um, so yeah, when she hears this familiar voice, she is in the middle of a conversation with a guy who's kind of weird, but also like she's no skin off her nose because she's just
She's
there
being
for him.
weird too. She's literally impersonating somebody else. Yeah. And so this person from the past is Desmond Sullivan. She has not seen him in 10 years. But of course he'd know her voice anywhere, and he's there as himself, sort of, but also undercover targeting this person, Henri or Henry Wickford, that she's talking to, who is a very bad guy. And so he kind of outs her to kind of like protect her, like get her out of there, basically.
He's
And
also kind of like, you don't want this guy like being
being
interested in
interested.
you.
Yeah.
And because she's been weird, he has been kind of like,
This is
don't
new.
you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she does introduce herself with her real name, and he's like cringes, like, "Oh my God, don't tell him your name," right? And even after all this comes out, Henry still seems interested, which is not good. And so he's like, "Hey, I need to talk to you over here, like
Let's
alone."
get out of
And
here.
so they leave the room, and there's a lot of subtext between them that is not being said out loud. That's clear. They were very close before and they no longer are. That is also clear. He's apparently not close with anyone from Chicago anymore. Um, but he does talk to his mom every week, but not his dad. And that's, you don't know why that is or whatever at this point. And so Ava is like, "Look, I'll leave and I will never contact Henry, but only if you come to my parents' barbecue on Sunday. You have to stay for 2 hours and you have to sit in a room alone with your dad for at least 20 minutes. Um, this is the deal, right?
Yeah.
And you have to bring a side dish."
She's
And
very specific and it's interesting.
yes.
Like,
It's almost like it reminded me of like in a fantasy novel when you're like making a deal with a fairy or like a
yeah,
genie or whatever, like you have to be extremely
careful.
explicit and not leave any like loopholes out of, the situation. And so he reluctantly agrees to this. And then she's like, "Okay, bye." And she leaves and he like secretly follows her home to make sure she gets there safely. And so we learn that he is a hacker, among other things. His handler is like in his
In
ear
his ear. Sue.
the whole time, and she's hilarious. Her name is Sue.
Yep. Likes to eat chips in his
While
ear.
talking. It's like, you can imagine what that's like. Um, and so that whole bit is pretty funny too. So Ava calls her sister after she gets home to complain about seeing Des and also how good looking he is. She's like, it should be criminal. Like, he should not be this good looking. It's not right. It's not fair. Like, I should not be expected to deal with this, basically. And it's very
He
funny.
should be a nerd and hideous, but yeah,
Yeah.
no.
And so her sister Grace is not showing adequate outrage for her taste. And so that's pretty funny too.
Yeah.
And so they live together, her and her sister. And her family is very close knit. Uh, and they're also very close to Desmond's parents, still, and have been for a long time. They were like, aunt and uncle growing up. Um, and so when he left 10 years ago, uh, it left a hole in all of their lives, basically, but especially hers. So we're back to Des, and he's on his way to this barbecue, and he's very out of sorts. His handler calls and says that she's realized who Ava is, and that it is the photo in his wallet that he often uses, like while he's undercover, and
Hmm.
says that like it's his
That
fiance
he's
or whatever.
pretending.
And it's not always the same picture, but it's always a picture of her. And she's like, I can't believe this is the girl from the picture. Like, what's going on, you know?
And yeah, he's like, it doesn't mean anything. And she's like, no, 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 no.
Okay.
Because people don't just carry pictures in their like it like
Right. Like an
a
actual
photograph
photograph in a wallet.
in
Yeah.
their wallet. People don't do that when it's
Yeah.
not anything.
And so she wants to know why. Like, why this girl? Why is she always in your wallet? And so he's like, well, we grew up together. And so it would check out as a story if anybody ever like looked into it. Like, I do actually know her and we have history. And she's like, okay, sure, Um, and so she's
He
like,
was not
well,
buying this at
yeah, no,
all.
she's not.
He
And
was
she's like, well,
like,
fine, switching tracks now. Like, Henry seemed to be interested in her. Like, can we use her to help with this case? And he's like, hell
no.
no. Like, no way am I
Immediate,
involving her in this.
emphatic no.
Yes.
And
And he's like, no, I'm not using her for that. Like, that is never going to happen. I will find another way. And she's like, well, you've been working on this for months. So, like, good luck, I guess.
also, she is a little bit irritated that he's taking cases like this one that don't really pay. And
Yeah.
he's being kind of a Robin Hood, which seems like the thing he has always done.
Right.
But this case isn't making him any money, and he's spending a lot of time on it. And
Yeah.
she's
And
like,
he's
"You
still
can't
paying
do it."
her, even though he's not like getting paid for this job or whatever. Excuse me. So, he's about to have a panic attack, he realizes, as he gets off the phone with Sue and he's in front of Ava's parents' house and he's like, oh, this is not good. Like, I need to take my meds. And so he takes his medicine, but he's like, I need to walk around the block because it takes like 20 minutes to kick in or whatever. And like, I need to go before somebody sees me. But
Somebody sees him.
somebody sees him. And it is Ava's dad, who is so happy to see him. It's really very
It's
sweet.
sweet, yeah.
And very emotional. And so he hugs him tight and he like brings him inside. And then his uncle Dan descends, and Dan knows a lot more about what's been going on in his life the last 10 years because he was with like that side of the family when he went away. And so he kind of recognizes that he needs to like be away. So he kind of, like brings him to the backyard. Um, and
Gives him
they're
a little bit of
chatting.
space.
And Dan never sugarcoats anything. Like, he always like gives it to him straight. And so but he clearly loves him. And he also always calls him on his bullshit. And so they kind of chat and everything's like starting to mellow out for him. His meds are working. And so he's just kind of rolling with whatever. And so he goes to find Ava and he like
Also,
sets his watch.
his Dan is like kind of like, oh, you brought those flowers for Ava, and he's like, no, for everyone, and he's like, oh, so you just happened to bring her favorite for everyone, and he's just like,
Yeah.
it's just what they had, like it's fine, but it's everyone in the family is very like, oh, yeah, Ava's here, you're here, and
You're here
he's
for Ava.
trying the
Yeah.
entire time. He's like, nope, definitely not. That's not what's happening.
Yeah.
But
But
everyone.
everybody knows. Well, and everybody knows their history and, they all have their own agenda basically. So he sets his watch for 2 hours. That's what he agreed to. And he goes to find her. So he finds her and her sister watching a K drama down in the basement. Grace, her sister, seems surprised but happy to see him. I guess she didn't really think he was actually going to show up. And then she kind of leaves them alone. She's like, okay, bye. And she like goes upstairs. And he's not really talking. So she deploys some old tricks that she used to have to make him talk. And she's like, well, this is great actually. I missed therapy this week. So like I can just like unload all my petty work drama onto you. This is going to be great, right? So she like, is telling him some story about the person who does birthday cards in the office, and it's all very like ridiculous.
It's very much drama.
And
Yeah.
he finally caves and says something that reminds her of her Des, as she thinks of him, old Des, and she kind of wants to cry. But she plays it off and heads upstairs. And
There's times in there too where she like he's trying to keep a straight face, but she knows him so well that she like can see when he's amused, can see when
mhm.
he's trying not to say something even though he wants to. And so you really get a sense of how close they used to be. Like even though they haven't seen each other in a long time, it's still very familiar when they're together.
And that almost makes it harder because as she's walking upstairs, she's just reminding herself, like, he made it clear 10 years ago when he left that he doesn't want to know me anymore. And like that hasn't changed as far as I know, basically.
Yeah. And the thing
Um,
is, at first, when she says that, it's like you think like, oh, well, the way he left, but no, he like told her, I don't want to know you anymore. And
yeah.
so she
And
has
she
reason to
needs to
be
finally get
hurt.
over it, basically, is what she's thinking to herself.
And her sister had told her, but like she needed
Yeah.
to get over, and she's like, "There's nothing to get over. We were just friends, and now we don't like we're just not friends anymore." But when she
Denial.
spends time with him, it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Oh, this thing. Yeah. So her family is people keep pushing them together and then leaving them alone. So like all day, like everybody in her family pretty much is like they'll like put them together on the couch and they'll be like, "Oh, I need to go do a thing," and then they'll like leave. And so Ava has also been leaving because she's like, "My family is not subtle and like this is awkward as hell." And like every time it happens, she just like gets up and leaves. So she's like, "I understand if he thinks I'm avoiding him, but like technically that isn't really what I'm trying to do. I'm just not letting this happen, right?"
yeah.
And so, but she is being kind of frosty because she's pissed off about the whole situation. And he's, acting indifferent. And they end up together in the backyard, like at the picnic
Right.
table. And she's finally like, you know what? I give up. Like, I would rather have one last chat with him in case this really is the last time I ever see him because I didn't get that last time. And so, like, I'm gonna like make the best of this, basically. And so she randomly brings up this old magician that he had at one of his birthday parties. And he's like, "Why are you asking about that?" And she's like, "Oh, my friend's kid's having a party. Like I thought maybe we could hire him if he hasn't retired." And she's like, "You got to be better at all his tricks than he did anyway. Your sleight of hand, is crazy." And they do kind of laugh, but then he's like, "Yeah, I mean, I was good at stealing things. Like that's not necessarily the best
A
thing
good
to
thing.
take out of that." Um, and they end up on the swing set, and she wants so badly to know what she did that made him like walk away from her. And she feels like she can't ask. Like she doesn't want to. It's almost like she doesn't want him to know that she's still so upset about it, but like, she very clearly is, and like she really wants to know what happened. And so he reminds her right before he's about to leave that she promised to stay away from Henry, and she gets huffy because she feels like he's telling her what to do. And she's like, "Well, I guess this is goodbye then." And she like holds out her hand like for him to shake it. And so he takes, and she's trying not to cry. He takes her hand, but he just like holds it. He doesn't like
Like
shake
shake it.
it. And he kisses her on the cheek and he says, "Goodbye, Ava." And so a
And
week
she's
later,
kind of like,
yeah.
am I gonna see you
Am I
again?
ever going
And
to see him
it's
again? Probably
like,
not.
there's
Yeah.
not really. He
It's
also, when
very
he leaves,
emotional.
because they do kind of, it's very like a fraught conversation. It's like,
Yeah.
it's nice, and then it's not, and then
Yeah.
and he does go like, oh, that's my
2 hours.
2 hours.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, that hurt my feelings, and I wasn't
Yeah.
even there. I was
Yeah.
like, whoa.
Right. Like I promised 2 hours. It's been 2 hours. Like, see you, bye. And yeah, it
Like
was
even yeah, the idea that like even if it felt like for a moment that maybe he was happy to be there or for a moment that it was like a real thing and then he's like, "Oh, time's up."
yeah,
I yeah, that
it was sad.
ouch.
Yeah, so a week later, Ava is still perturbed about how pretty he is. And she and Grace are talking about it because now Grace has seen him and understands the problem.
He's very pretty apparently.
And so Grace asks Ava if she's gonna see him again, and she's like, no. Um, I made him come to the barbecue. Like he never wanted to be there anyway. Like he still doesn't want to know me. Like nothing has changed, basically. And Grace, I guess, kind of looks at her for a minute and says, wow, he really broke your heart, didn't he? And
He's
uh
like, "No, no, we were just friends. Like
and
that
Grace is
visit
like,
wasn't a
come off
thing."
it. Like after all this time, you have to admit that that is not, it's not like what you thought it was, you know? Um, and and Ava admits, at least to herself, that at the time at 15, she didn't really understand that she loved him as more than a friend. Like he was her best friend, he was her person. Like, but that it didn't equate in her mind to she loved him that way. You know what I mean? Like she didn't really give
Yeah.
it.
But her sister is kind of like, "Where did you think you were going to be in 10 years?" And she's like,
Right,
"Oh, living with Des." And like,
right.
like her idea of the future always included him.
Yeah,
But because he had always been in her life, she just thought, like, no, that's how
yeah.
it's
And
just the
Grace
normal thing.
is like, maybe he thought that he and his diagnosis were a burden to you. Like maybe that's why he walked away. And she is like indignant at that. Like, no way. Like I wasn't, it was me. Like I wasn't mature enough to be the friend that he needed. Like clearly that is like the problem, right? My fault. Um, and so a lot of the things they discuss as well definitely sent out the idea that Ava is like demisexual. She has to have feelings for a person before she is sexually attracted to them. Um and they it's not explicitly stated, but I feel like it's definitely there.
I mean, she's not interested in having sex with anybody that she's not like that she doesn't have a connection with already.
Yeah.
And she
Or even
has
forget
had a
about
hard
sex, like even
time.
kissing somebody that she doesn't already
Yeah, so like the
like.
romantic feelings don't
Yeah.
like come up until after. And she has found in her experience that like anytime anyone was like dating or getting close, the boys wanted to hop to that first. And she
Right.
was like, "Oh no,
She's
I'm
not
not
into it.
there."
Yeah.
It was interesting that like she even even before Des left, like had dated people,
Hmm.
but she never had any kind of like it's like she was trying it out to see
Right.
like what it was about, but
Hmm.
it was she didn't have
It
any
didn't
kind
work
of
for her.
romantic.
Yeah. So a few days later, Ava is summoned to meet a new client who asked for her by name. She gets to this building and this like
Oh,
platoon.
sorry.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna be because we were talking about how like even she has kissed a couple of people.
Yes.
She's never had sex with anyone.
Hmm.
She's not like so and it's so like you were saying with her being demisexual, like that's
Yeah.
a thing that is kind of explicitly talked about in this bit. And then her
Mm.
sister's also like, "I'm gonna go out of town. You should come with." And she's like, maybe I should, I guess." And she's like, "You'll talk yourself out of it."
Yep.
Which is the second time, because even in the very first chapter, she
Yeah.
says something about how if
Oh, right. Like
something's
she
going to
wouldn't
be
have gone to
done,
that event if she had had more than like an hour to like get ready for it or whatever. She would have
yeah,
talked herself out of it. Yeah.
yeah,
And so clearly this has become a pattern for her, and you get the impression that that wasn't a thing she used to do before he wasn't in her life. Um, so yeah, she gets to this building and she kind of feels like somebody's watching her, and she sees a reflection in the window of a guy in black like hiding behind a planter, and she's like, that's fucking weird. Like, I don't know if that's about me or not, but weird. So she goes into the building. This platoon of security guards accompanies her into an elevator up to this meeting that she's supposedly having with a
it's weird
person.
because she has gone to the security, like to the desk to like, "Oh, I need to check in," and they don't know what she's talking about. And then these other people come and take her away, and she's like,
Yes.
"My
And
family has been
she
security.
gets
This
out
is
of the
weird."
elevator into this office building, and who she finds is Henry. And she's like, and I wrote, uh-oh, in my notes.
Yeah,
So
because she's like, I have a meeting with a Mr. some other
fail.
completely
Yeah.
different name.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just like,
Yeah.
no, you're here with
Nope, you're
me. And
here to meet with me. And he acts super creepy. He tells her, I don't like being ignored. And she's like, what? Like, I met you once 2 weeks ago. How is that ignoring you? Like, I don't understand. And he's like, I've been sending you gifts and messages. Like, you haven't gotten them? And she's like, no. And then one of the security guys pops back in and says there's a fire in the server room and that he has to come and like set up this like passkey thing or something. So
they go, but then she's like locked in.
he
She's like,
locks her
oh,
in his office. She's literally knocking on the door, like, I have to go pee, like, let me out. And she realizes that there's a bathroom in the office. So, and it's like an emergency situation. So she's like, okay. So she goes in there and goes to the bathroom and is like hurrying to finish because there's no lock on the bathroom door.
but there
Um,
sure is a lock on the office door. And
yeah.
she's still thinking about like, well, how is she gonna get out of there?
And so she comes out of the bathroom, and it's one of those things where the door looks like the wall, so it opens like out from inside the bathroom. And when she comes out, the a man in
There's
black,
someone in
similar
there.
to who she saw earlier outside, is reaching into a safe underneath Henry's desk. She's not really sure what to do, and the office door bursts open, and this guy comes running towards her and shoves her back into the bathroom.
Shuts the door.
And then
Kind
she
of.
starts hearing gunshots. So she gets down on the ground. She is freaking out. And after a while of silence, she kind of pops her head up. She looks around. She can't find her phone, but she does spy a thumb drive on the ground next to her. And she's like, this
Pick
must
that up.
be what this man was getting out of the safe. So she pockets it in a secret pocket in her underwear that her ex-CIA mother gave to her and her sister a long time ago, and were like, always keep like a credit card, a key to your house, and I can't remember what else in
I
there,
can't
like at
remember,
all
but yeah,
times. Like this, it's like a
it's the emergency pocket.
yes,
Don't you
exactly.
have it in an emergency underwear pocket? I
Yes.
feel like
That
my
would be
underwear are
amazing.
missing some things now.
So she takes her heels off and she gathers up her stuff and she like pokes her head out of the room with the office doors like hanging now, like open. And she steps on glass, which sucks, but she keeps going. She sees
But
the
she
mask.
doesn't walk well in heels. We should mention this that she took them off because she's like, I'm never gonna run out of here well enough in these
Well,
shoes. I
and I
want to
think
break my
she
ankle.
mentioned that it's because she was like shaking from being scared. So like normally I don't think like she enjoys intimidating people because she's tall and then she wears heels, and when she's taller than the men, she likes that. So I think I felt like she wears them all the time, but in her current state, she did not feel safe like wearing them
To
because she was
run
like
in them.
shaking. And so she steps on glass. She's still trying to get out of there. She spies the masked man fighting like four security guards at once. Um, and then security guards come up from behind her and are like pointing gun at her. And the masked man grabs her and pulls her around a corner right before shots ring out. And then he like carries her away, but of course she doesn't want to be somebody's hostage, so she's like fighting him off.
Yeah.
She even hits him in the back of the head with a baton that she like picks up off the ground. And but she's hurt, she's not running fast. And he catches her again and he asks her, like, where are you hurt? Did you get shot? And she realizes, like, oh shit, I'm about to faint. And then the man says, Sue, get us the fuck out of here now. And then she passes out. So you know who this person is. In case you
She
didn't know
doesn't know.
before, that was like confirmation that you do know that it's Des. So Ava wakes up bound to this like hospital bed. Her foot is
She doesn't
bandaged.
know where she is either.
Yeah.
She's like in this room that's just like a closet. Like it's
She's like,
just
am
it's
I still in the
darkly
same
still.
building? Like, who has me? Like, what's going on? And so the masked man uh shows his face from the corner of the room and he walks over and puts like an earbud in her ear and
But
she's
like doesn't
freaking out.
show his actual face.
Yeah, no,
He
he's
just
masked, he's got sunglasses on, like a hood, whatever. So he puts the earpiece in her ear and Sue starts talking to her. And she's like, you're safe, like nobody's gonna hurt you. I need to ask you some questions though. And Ava is like, no, I don't think I'm gonna answer your questions until I know like that I can safely get out of here. And so she decides to use the flash drive, as a bargaining chip, which is why she picked it up to begin with. So she says, like, if you let me leave here and take me to this building, which is the building that actually Dez's dad's company, security company, is in, then I will tell you like where it is. And so Sue agrees to these terms, and then she starts
The thing that's
asking all these
interesting
questions.
too is Sue asked her a bunch of questions that Ava is like, I don't think
She actually cares
she's
about this.
interested in all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like she feels like there's only like one or two of the questions that are actually
Like things that she really
things
wants to
that she
know.
wants to
And the
know.
rest are like misdirect, like red herring. She asked about some senator or something. Like it's all like, red herrings. So then Sue is like, Raziel, which is his like hacker name, needs to frisk you. And she starts to freak out. She jumps up, but of course her foot is still hurt, and she like makes a hurt noise, and he grabs her and says like, are you okay, in his full voice, which he had been like whispering before.
And
And
she
she's
had
like,
already, there had been a couple things that she had
yeah,
been like, that's like I feel like
he
I should
rescued me,
know.
question mark, yeah, like
But
he's those
when she
shoulders look
uses his
familiar.
voice, yeah.
But she would know that voice anywhere, of course. And so she thinks back over the day with the knowledge that this man is clearly Dez. And she's like, okay, this tracks. So he saved her, obviously. And she's like, fine, frisk me. And she's big mad, so angry at him. Why did you let me sit here scared when you could have told me that it was you? Like, this is bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so he pats her down.
It's real kind of sexy, and
Well,
I
at
think
first
that
it's very
he
like TSA, and she like cracks a joke about, oh, you work for TSA on the side, whatever, and finds nothing. And he's like, tell me where it is. And she says, it's where you think it is. And so he's like, oh, it's like that, right? So he tells Sue, like, hang up and turn off the camera, which she does. And so he like pushes her like hands on the bed. So she's like at a, right angle.
Mhm.
And then he like, while she's back to him, he takes off his mask and his gloves, and he starts like putting his hands up her skirt till it's like up over her butt, and is basically like feeling her up. And she is very turned on, and he is also clearly very turned on. And also he is very tortured, and she wanted him to be tortured, but he definitely is. And now she is like shocked to learn that this man wants her as much as she wants him, and she does not know what to really do with
And
this
both of
knowledge
those
at this
things are
point.
shocking to her. Like she has
Yes.
not felt this way about other people. So
Yes.
she's like, "Oh,
Oh, this is
oh."
what this is like. Yeah, it's
And
very,
then the
yeah.
fact that he's also into it, she's like, "Well."
But also it makes her want to cry because she's like, I've never felt this way about anybody else, and this sucks, right? So she's like, I can't deal with this. So finally she like bucks him off of her basically, and then she like stands up and she like pulls out the flash drive and she covers herself back up, and she's like, here, take it. And as she goes to leave, she demands that he give her 4 hours of time before he leaves town to answer her questions. And he agrees very easily. And she's like, you're lying. Like, oh my God, I know you're lying. And she
So
says,
she's like,
if
"I'm never
you,
going to see you
she
again."
starts to cry. She's like, you're a real asshole. And like, I'm never going to see you again, am I? And, or she's like, I'm never going to see you again, am I? And you're a real asshole. And he says, I know. And then she's like, okay, fine. If this is the last time I'm going to see you, then I'm going to do whatever I want, basically. And she walks back over to him and she's like, kiss me. And it's an amazing, like, life changing kiss. Like, so awesome. Both of them are clearly like not ready for it.
Yeah.
And I wrote down the quote. She says, goodbye, Des, and thanks for the kiss. I hope you live a happy life. I think you'll always be my favorite person, and I'll never forget you. And then she leaves. And
And
that's
that's
the
the
end of
end of
chapter
chapter
12. And so we're left in a place where, I mean, my feelings were hurt. I know her feelings, but
yeah.
also she was turned on and she was very confused about the entire situation. And so we will be back.
Well, it's like all this time, right? She's been like that. No, we were not like that. And then it turns out that like maybe he's the only person she's like that with.
Yep.
Oh, but also the entire time he has been like we can't, like, this can't.
Mhm.
But when that kiss happens, you are like,
Things can change quickly, friends. So come back next week and find out all about it. We'll see you then.
see then.